looking for a job can be tough. So what do you need to do to sort of get your foot through the door, especially if you're young and you're just starting out? Felix, as the youngest here, let's start with you. As somebody, a fresh grad maybe with no experience, and then you look through these job listings, all requiring experience, what do you need to do?
Right, I think, as a Gen Z, going to the workplace, I think a lot of times we are, when we look at the word experience, right, we are sort of scared of what it actually means, right? It's really about reframing experience into other forms of experiences that you have as well. Experience doesn't have to mean like, oh, you have worked for somebody before. Even volunteering in a group, in a project, right? Leading a student club in school, right? Those are experiences to say as well. And when you then maybe present it in a resume or in an interview, right, don't say that, oh, I studied computer science, right? You could say something like, oh, I actually create a web app, that has drawn 1,000 users using React and Flask, for example. And that shows how you actually are able to do those jobs rather than, and the skill sets that you have. So I think a very key advice is really to reframe experience and look at how do you use a skills and sort of build proof of skills or proof of work in the things that you've done.
That's very good advice. And I wonder, Shulin, how do you make your resume stand out these days in the sea of resumes?
Okay, so as a recruiter, I want to share with everyone that it's a dirty little secret, but recruiters spend very little time looking at your CV. They maybe scan it for 6 seconds, and then they move on to the next. And so how do you make your CV stand out is really make sure that you customize it to the role that you're applying to. If you send the same generic CV to, let's say, 100 roles, and then you wonder why you're not getting any job interviews, the reason is because you're not actually thinking about the person who's receiving your CV. So just imagine a recruiter at a big tech company. For every job vacancy, they get maybe thousands of applications all over the world. So how do you make sure that it stands out? You must have keywords, right? So let's say I'm applying for, let's say, an employment role with Indeed, okay? I need to say that I have employment experience, or like what Felix said, show that I've demonstrated some skills. If you're a Gen Z, you can say that maybe you've written papers, or you have a special interest, you've done some projects, or you can, I'm not asking you to make things up, let's be clear, but you can also reverse engineer, right? So if you realize, hey, hang on a minute, this is my dream job, but I don't have the skills, then maybe you have to do something, do some extracurricular activities. So in summary, to make your CV stand out, make sure you have some words in bold. Make sure you keep it short, 1 or 2 pages. If you have like 5 or 6 pages, what you can do is you can do 1 or 2 pages, and then you have a separate attachment for all your deals and your cases. Because that way, the recruiter will like, oh, okay, you're making my job easy. And okay, maybe you get a job interview.
Rohan, is that what you would look out for too?
Yeah, I just wanted great answers from Felix and Shulin, but I also want to add one aspect. When you really think about recruiters and recruitment now, there's a lot of technology being used, right? So, bad news, even before a recruiter sees your resume, it's going through a scanning, automated scanning. There are things called applicant tracking systems. So there is a lot of things that they say, keywords is very important. And what keywords to use, they're telling you. Look at the job description, right? The job description has the keywords that the company cares about. So there are actually systems scanning resumes to see if the right keywords are there, even before a human sees it. And that's important that you put that out there. So, and another thing to remember is when you're making your resume or your CV, you should make it, don't put too much design and all of that, because the systems get confused by it. So make it very simple. So it's really important you make it simple, straightforward. And of course, as Felix was saying, yes, as a new graduate, you don't have work experience, but experiences are there. And one thing I recommend is you have skills. Make sure you highlight those skills. Even if you don't have the specific work experience, you should highlight all the skills you have so that, when a system sees it, it knows you have it. When the recruiter reads it, they know you have it. So it's important.
I just want to add one more thing. It's an excellent point. So how do we highlight skills in a CV? It's not to say I am a hardworking person or I have a lot of experience doing X. Actually, if you have 3 or 5 bullet points to say, I've increased revenue for my company by 20% in this year, or I have managed a team of 3 to achieve these results, it's very clear, like, wow, leadership skills, sales ability. So that's very important to come through in the CV.
I think like one more thing, bonus tip, right? To basically understand what skills the job description is looking for, use technology like ChatGPT, right? Run through the job description in there and try to figure out what kind of skills they are looking for in the job description, and then try to maybe reverse map it to what you have. Of course, don't make things up, right? Try to reframe what you already have done to align with what the job description is looking for.
So this said, we are also hearing that the resume is maybe not the most important part of the job hunting process. So where does that leave us then?
So it's really funny, right? The best way to get a job is a resume, but it's literally the worst way also. Because what is a resume? You tend to put the best version of yourself on there, but it's not the real person. There is so much more to a person than just the resume. And unfortunately, for now, resumes are the way to do it. So the idea is to try and make sure that you are able to get in front of a human as much as possible. Even though there are technologies out there for scanning, and if you can find some way to put across who you are through your resume, you should do that. Because, as I said, it's the best way and the worst way to do this.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I recently hired a Gen Z for my office as an intern. And I received so many CVs. The only reason why I picked this guy was because of his extracurricular activities, right? If someone is from Gen Z, you're a fresh grad, you have no experience, how you stand out is the projects that you do. So he went to do some overseas trip to do some volunteer work. I was like, wow. And then he did some project for to help the homeless. I was like, wow, amazing guy. Of course, he got the internship. So how do you make yourself get a job in addition to your CV? It's actually building a social media presence. I'm not asking you to do TikTok dance videos. That's not quite the social media presence. It's actually at least having a basic profile on LinkedIn. Having a photo that is not like a selfie, having a decent profile photo. You know what? Let's say you are interested in a particular industry. You should look for thought leaders in that industry, connect with them, and see how they position themselves. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm not asking you to copy. I'm asking you to be inspired and then do your own version that feels right for you. It's actually not that difficult to stand out in a crowded market of job seekers.
Do you have any other tips on building a social media presence? Like, how important is that these days?
So I'm 42 years old this year. I know I don't look it. Some people tell me. But I've been a legal recruiter for 15 years. Before that, I was a lawyer for 4 years. And trust me, I got a lot of rejections when I was trying to leave law to do other jobs. Back then, there was no social media, right? But 4 years ago, I had no choice because my business was really going downhill. It was out of survival mode that I started building a social media presence. So don't wait until you're desperate to build a social media brand. Do it when you don't need it. It's just like network with recruiters when you don't need it. People don't like it when you are coming to them only when you need a favor. So to answer your question, how important is it to build a social media presence? Very, very important. But no one is asking you to, there's a fine line. LinkedIn is a hard yes for me. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook is a question mark. I know Gen Zs probably don't like me saying that, but I have to say that if you're posting photos, okay, you know what? I'm going to say a story. There was once we represented this guy who was looking for a job, okay? And then we were finding it very puzzling. How come he didn't get any job interviews? His CV looked really good. One of my clients then texted me on the side on WhatsApp. Hey, Shulin, do you know this guy is a wannabe influencer? And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know. So actually, there's nothing wrong, right, in wanting to be an influencer. But there is something wrong if he's posting photos of himself almost naked, bubbles covering his private parts, and his Instagram profile is not private, okay? Really. So after that, I told my entire team, please Google first, okay? And so the social media presence is important, but you need to make sure it's aligned with who you want to be in terms of your career. Yeah, I know that's a very long answer. Yes.
No, but that's great. Felix, you had something.
Yeah, I think the flip side of that, right? I think nowadays a lot of Gen Zs, they do have a lot of social media presence, like TikTok, Instagram, and all that. And like what Shulin mentioned, right? Depending on the role you're applying for, that could be used to your advantage, right? So I have seen so many cases of Gen Zs who are applying for marketing role, like content creator roles, right? And their content or their social media account become their differentiator compared to other candidates that are out there in the market. So I think it really is also about knowing what to show and understanding the role or the kind of career you want, and from there building a niche, right, to be the better position for that role itself or for that dream career that you have.
So when it comes to social media, we're talking about networking online. Rohan, I wonder what you think about old-fashioned networking. Do we still need to do it? And how important is it?
Yes, right. When you network with someone online, and it's very important to do that. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it is important to network online, but there isn't that human touch that you get when you actually meet people. You're more likely to be remembered when you meet in person. Otherwise, it's just an invite to connect. There might be a few posts. You don't get to see that person really. But I think there's a lot of value even now to network the old-fashioned way, because I think more comes out of it sometimes.
And I want to liken it to online dating versus meeting face-to-face, right? So like you and I were meeting for the first time in person, we had a Zoom call, but now I feel like there's a connection made. It's very different. So I still believe, I don't think it's old school, it's just we have to be mindful that obviously Gen Zers, they are a lot more used to their digital generation, right? They're very used to hiding behind messages, WhatsApp, LinkedIn messages, but it actually doesn't really bode well in terms of relationship building in the longer run.
I think maybe to add on to that point, I think a mix of both is always good. For Gen Zs, I think your advantage, right, is that you're young, and for many of you, you're still studying, right? And if you're on LinkedIn and you sort of connect with, say, industry professionals, people who are already in the workplace, they are more than 100% willing to at least give you a coffee chat, right? Because they see it as them mentoring and giving back to the younger generation. So use that to your advantage.
And you can use the messages to sort of warm someone up, It also helps you while you can LinkedIn stalk a person and know what their interests are before that face-to-face meeting.
I think, and then sort of complementing it with the in-person. I remember this story. I was doing an exhibition actually in MBS, right, for my company. And this student actually came up to me and he connected with me on LinkedIn. So he said, hey, good job on what you're doing and things like that. And I was like, oh yeah, so we had some exchanges on LinkedIn. And he came to my booth and I was like, oh, yeah, we connected before. And we had a chat and then he handed me his CV and his portfolio. And I'm like, wow, this guy is interesting, right?
You're going to see a lot of people flooding your LinkedIn messages now.
I wonder what are some tips for people not used to networking?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. I'm very, very bad at networking. And I know it sounds silly to say that I'm sitting here on stage to give you advice. But I'll tell you why I'm going to give you advice. It's because I had to get good at it. Don't be shy. Shyness is not going to help you. No one's going to bite your head off if you just go and say hi and try to understand that. And but make sure when you meet someone and you're networking, make sure you have something to talk about. Don't be generic. Make sure you understand, like the story you told, he had a goal. He wanted to give you his CV. I'm not saying you go and start handing out your CV everywhere. That's not the goal. But make sure there is an agenda for you to have a conversation. Because if it's a very generic conversation, you're less likely to be remembered. If you have a specific need or a specific goal in mind, it's going to be memorable for the person, right? Like Felix just told the story about the gentleman who gave his CV. If he had just come and said, hi, Felix wouldn't have told that story today. So it's important to have a goal in mind when you're talking to people.
We talked about how it's important to tailor your resume to the job you want, but is there also value in just sort of spraying and praying, that is, applying to as many openings as possible, hoping that something fits?
Okay, so the number one thing you could do to destroy your career is to spray and pray. It doesn't work. Praying, yes. Spraying, no. Here's the thing, right? I've seen so many Gen Zers, actually at all stages of their careers, where they lose control of their CV. Once you lose control of your CV, you forget where you apply to. Then the next day, let's say some HR calls you, hey, we want to invite you down for an interview. You're like, oh, sure. But you've forgotten what the company is, when you applied it. And the worst thing is if you have sent your CV multiple times to one company. Because it reeks of desperation, it looks very like you're disorganized, you don't know what you're doing. So spraying and praying, very bad idea. What you need to do is keep track of where your CV has gone to. It's very tempting, right, to go trigger happy, like, oh, okay, apply on LinkedIn. But it's actually quite dangerous. And also when you forget where you apply, you're not being intentional. And then now the HR is confused. Oh, this guy has applied for 2 roles, right? And we see that happen all the time. In fact, true story, we have seen many people get not called for interviews because they've applied for multiple times to the same company. They don't even offer, even if the CV is spot on, they just think, okay, this person's desperate. There's something wrong, it's a red flag. So don't spray and pray, but don't spray.
Just to add, the thing is, it also shows not just disorganized, like Shulin said, it also shows you aren't clearly aware of your own skills, right? And that's dangerous. If you go there and you apply for a job you're not qualified for, it either means A, you don't know your own skill sets, or B, you didn't read the job description. A lot of the times it can be B, and that doesn't look good in front of employers.
I want to talk about after you apply and that sort of excruciating wait. Is there an etiquette to how you follow up on a job application?
Yes, definitely, right? Again, I think dating is a perfect example for this. I think there's a lot of similarities between finding a job and finding someone to be with. Within a week, if you are, like, for example, if you ask someone out and they say no, no means no. Don't follow up, don't bug them. If they haven't gotten back to you, try one more time. But then again, don't bug them, right? There's a very fine line between asking someone out and going into stalking. And it's similar when it comes to jobs as well, right? You apply to a job, you don't hear back. Yes, you are well within your rights to reach out to them. Maybe once, after a week. And if you still don't hear back, then they probably aren't interested.
I love the dating analogy. And so the first date or the first interview is where there is an excruciating wait. And it can be very agonizing, can be very painful. The thing is, you have to remember to send a thank you note within 24 to 48 hours. It really differentiates you as to whether you're enthusiastic and to even address some of the questions that maybe you feel you didn't address properly during the job interview. So how do you follow up? There are 2 ways, right? In one circumstance, you are working directly with a recruiter, okay? Follow up the recruiter, because recruiters are inundated with roles and emails all the time. And say, hey, you know, I haven't heard back from you, just wondering whether my application is being considered. And if you've gone for a job interview and they haven't gotten back to you, after 3 or 4 weeks, I think it's reasonable to write and say, hey, can I assume that I'm no longer being considered? The second scenario is you're not working with the recruiter, it's directly with the hiring manager, and you don't have the hiring manager's email. So this is where LinkedIn can help. And again, like what Rohan said, don't overdo it. Follow up politely. And you just need some closure. Just say, hey, you know, it was really great interviewing with you. I hope we can stay in touch, because they might consider you when another opening comes up.